Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Carlos Restrepo to talk about digital assets fundraising. Carlos, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Really happy to be here. I appreciate the invite.
I'm really excited to talk about digital assets and how they relate to NFTs. But before we get into those meaty details, I'm curious to know, what is your superhero origin story? That is to say, how did you get started working with nonprofits?
I think it's like many folks who work in nonprofits kind of fell into it, right? It was back in the mid 90s, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in health administration, and hospitals were closing as HMOs and different types of health management was coming into play. And I ended up working at a professional society, American Institute of Chemical Engineers. And that pretty much led me into a whole career in the nonprofit sector.
So you kind of fell into it like most of us. And I guess once you got into that world, it was hard to leave, right? It has a stickiness factor, I've noticed.
It does. And part of it is just the mission. I often refer to the nonprofit sector as the middle sector. You know, you have the public sector where they're supposed to do good, it's government, but there's a lot of overhead, there's a lot of inefficiency and bloat to it. Then there is the for-profit market, right? The for-profit sector where there is a lot of efficiency, but all of that efficiency is to drive profit margins for the owners of the companies. The middle sector, what I found fascinating about it was that you had the mission-based element to it where you wanted to do good, and you have a mission and a purpose. At the same time, every penny becomes so important to your mission and what you're trying to achieve that you really try to operate in many ways as lean as possible, which kind of brings in some of those for-profit elements. So from my perspective, the nonprofit world was kind of the best of all. And I've enjoyed the nonprofit sector so much, I ended up getting my master's in nonprofit management 10 years after I got my bachelor's.
Oh, wow.
At that point, I knew what my career path was.
I bet. And to your point, I've noticed a lot of nonprofits too have similar challenges as for-profits. But you're right, the mission obviously is very different. And it's not about how much money we can make for the shareholders, but how much impact can we have in our community? How much good can we do?
Correct.
So digital assets and digital asset fundraising, there's going to be a lot of terms. We're going to use a few acronyms as well. I was hoping we could start maybe at a high level definition and define some of these acronyms before we start getting into these details. So let's start with the word digital asset fundraising. What does that mean to you?
So one of the things that I was working in fintech, and I was looking at ways to kind of talk about the payments industry and how the payments industry is evolving and how it could support nonprofits. And I was getting into blockchain and into different elements, and that led down a whole rabbit hole of Metaverse, blockchain, NFTs, and all of these other elements. And one of the things I realized is that more and more of these digital assets are going to be true ownership, which is kind of like the key definition for Web3, is that you have ownership of an asset, not just creating. And once you have ownership of something, and once the marketplace can actually take those digital assets and do something with it, it opens up the opportunity for everyday heroes, right? People who want to give to organizations, people who want to be involved in nonprofits, to actually provide something more than just dollars, right? Now they can create assets, they can create works of art. It's like open field for what a individual can do to support an organization or a mission or a purpose that they care about. And so digital asset fundraising really comes from the idea of you have creators that are building these digital assets. You have metaverses that are existing where individuals are finding ways to either bring the real world or create fantasy worlds where good can be done. And from my perspective, I think that there is a great opportunity for nonprofits to engage the digital creators and work with them to find ways of really creating sustainable funding streams, exposing new generations to traditional organizations and kind of like in a creative and native manner, because the younger generation, they exist, they're familiar with Minecraft, they're familiar with Roblox, right? And those are digital assets that a lot of kids are creating games on Roblox. And then the other part of it is, as a digital asset, it's ethereal, right? It's in the cloud, it's available anywhere for anyone. And so it opens up new markets to geographically limited nonprofits, which the mission might be universal, but their funding might be, might limit them just to a specific geographic area. Once you go digital, that goes away.
When I think of digital assets, I'm already jumping to NFTs, and of course the early version of NFTs, which were, you could buy GIF of a basketball player doing a slam dunk, or you could buy like the first tweet ever made, which was interesting. It was very novel. People didn't know quite what to do with it. I know it's matured since then, and it still has a way to mature. But how would you, if we were to give, and I know a digital asset isn't quite an NFT, if I understood correctly, an NFT is a type of digital asset. So how would you give an example, or what are some examples of digital assets, like in the sense of Minecraft? Because we'll use that as a context. I think hopefully a lot of people know what Minecraft is. But in this game, let's say, for example, I assume that you can buy certain tools or certain skins or colors or things to add on to the game as a type of digital asset. Is that an example of a digital asset, or do you have another example on the top of your mind that we can use for this context?
No, and I think that that's exactly right. When you think of digital asset, you think of everything that's already out there, right? So everything from weapons you can buy for Fortnite and DLCs that you can download for games that you're playing, downloadable content DLC, to new game, like little games that are built on Roblox platform. I know Fortnite announced that they are coming out with a creator tool where individuals will be able to create kind of their own spaces in Fortnite for people to play. And I believe Nike got involved with something like that, where we know Walmart did the whole Walmart world in Roblox. So there's a lot of examples of where digital assets and digital creation is kind of mixing in with the real world. And so that's more of the traditional kind of model of it's on a platform, it's limited to what's there, and it's digital by nature, but it's not an NFT. And so as I like to say that, while all NFTs are digital assets, not all digital assets are NFTs. And NFTs have gotten a bad rap. So sometimes it's good to kind of make sure that folks understand that when we're talking about the technology, it's not just one element of it. It's kind of a more broad-based perspective of what a digital asset can be and how a digital asset can support organizations.
Great. So let's move then the context to the fundraiser or the not fundraising organization. How would they use or talk to creators of digital assets to help them in their fundraising capacity?
What I focus on is definitely more the Metaverse, more of what I call UGC3, User-Generated Content 3, version 3, which relates to Web3. And as I mentioned before, a quick and simple way of defining Web3 has been Web 1 was read, right? When you just had the mosaics and all that back in the day where you could just read information. Web 2 was when platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, et cetera, kind of came out, and people can now create content, but that content was more visual and media based. Web 3 is when we start to get into ownership, right? And so now not only can you create digital assets, you can put those digital assets up in any marketplace, or maybe not any marketplace, but more and more marketplaces, and they can be sold. And a lot of times that kind of relates to maybe a metaverse, and metaverses tend to be associated with blockchains, not necessarily, but in a more modern version, metaverses are now starting to be more associated with some sort of blockchain element. So when I think of digital asset fundraising and aligning that with an organization, what I'm thinking about is how do you use games, play to earn games, for example, right? They were very, very popular. They're still around. How can you use a play to earn game to create a fundraising element? How can you work with a metaverse that aligns with your mission to kind of help create a perpetual, what I like to call perpetual good, right? Where a digital asset can be bought and sold, and every time that happens, your organization receives a piece of that sale. Now, back in the day, Bored Apes and their Yacht Club series, they reached some really crazy sales. Imagine being able to get 10% of one of these $1 million sales, when it happens. I think that everything has come down from the craziness, as people have seen that, okay, there was an opportunity, but there was also a lot of bad actors and so forth. But now what's happening is we're starting to see a better indication of practical use, right? And that's evolving. Even that is not fully there yet. But little by little, we're kind of building towards how do you engage the right tool that aligns with your mission so that you can create this perpetual good.
So let me just paint a picture as far as I understand it. Well, we haven't defined all the personas, but let's say I understand there's going to be 3 of them. We got the creator of the digital asset, the one who generates whatever that asset is. We've got the nonprofit, and then we have the owner of the asset. We haven't really talked about that persona just yet, but I'm sure we will as the conversation continues. So the nonprofit would, I guess, or it sounds like they would reach out to a creator of a digital asset or to create a new digital asset to be able to publicize this on some marketplace that owners could then purchase. We'll get into how the transactions would work, but I just want to make sure I'm clear on the concept. And the idea would be not only would the creator get paid for their work, but the nonprofit would as well. And it sounds like, or if I'm also leading ahead or looking ahead, when the owner is changing, and if the owner, for example, sells that asset at some point down the road, not only or potentially would the creator get repaid a portion of that sale, but also the nonprofit. Is that kind of like the high level transactional type of situation that we're talking about?
In an ideal situation, correct.
Okay. Now, of course, that begs the question of what is not ideal, but let's stick with the ideal for now. So, and the asset could be as simple as, and you gave examples still of games. So is that a feasible and realistic asset that a nonprofit would leverage? Like, I don't know how many nonprofits know enough about the current games to know, which ones they should go towards. Is there some kind of system or guide to learn, hey, look, you might want to consider a creator that creates digital assets for, your Minecraft or your Fortnite or whatever else is popular these days, and guide them in that process? Like, how would that mechanism work? How would it basically, another way of asking this question is, how would a nonprofit who is interested in this kind of idea want to explore it more in a more practical sense?
So I think that right now there is the tried and true model, right? Which is NFT creators, right? Usually digital artists will work with an organization they like and do like a giant fundraiser selling their NFTs and so forth. Examples of something like that was, I know that, for example, the Angry Pitbull Club, they do a series of NFTs, and they worked with Best Friends Animal Society to do a big fundraiser, and they were able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars through these fundraisers for the organization. So that's kind of the traditional model. NFTs can have what's known as smart contracts. Smart contracts really is just a business rule where it says, okay, when this happens, when this triggers, this effect happens, right? So when this gets purchased, distribute 10% of the purchase price to this account, kind of thing, right? And so it becomes kind of a way of being able to define royalties into an NFT, and that's where the payment comes in. Obviously, the Angry Pitbull Club, they are there trying to support, educate about pit bulls and so forth, and so they working with a organization like Best Friends Animal Society makes a lot of sense, right? Because there's alignment of mission and vision. I'm working with one nonprofit, and I'm looking forward to making our announcement soon, working with them to help bring them into a metaverse called Upland.me. And Upland is a metaverse mapped to the real world So there's cities, there's real world kind of elements that are mapped into this virtual space. And what is interesting about that is because of that, real world nonprofits that might be able to create digital elements of themselves or create digital representations of themselves can actually then bring them into this metaverse and work with the community or work with the platform itself to create these, to sell these digital assets within the metaverse. And then those digital assets kind of become a different revenue stream that is one, still mission based. So, one of the things that people always worry about is unrelated business income tax, right? And how that might affect their 501c3 status and so forth. But if you do these in a way where there is alignment between the vision and purpose of your organization and the revenue stream that is coming in, which revenue is not a 4-letter word. I think that is very important for nonprofits to understand that diversifying your revenue, understanding revenue is important to your business model, and nonprofits are businesses. That diversifying your revenue through these digital assets that are aligning with your mission and vision actually is a very good thing for your organization for the 3 reasons I said before, where we really are trying to, one, bring a new audience in. This metaverse, Upland, is worldwide. So there is going to be now awareness of this organization throughout the world, not just in the United States. So things like that, I think, is where you start to look at, like any technology, it's a tool, right? And so is there alignment of that technology with your mission and vision? And then exploring what's available, what's out there, I think is part of it. Working with individuals that know the space, I think is important because there is a lot going on and there are some bad actors, but there's also a lot of really good things happening. So it's brand new and everyone is still trying to figure it out as well.
I love the concept though, because to your point, additional revenue streams are always important. Additional markets as well. The fact that this could be and is global, it's not just local anymore. And I agree that as long as it's aligned with the organization's mission, so it's not, completely radically different, but there is some kind of cohesion between the real world and the virtual world. I'm still curious to know though, so you mentioned finding the right digital creators. Is there any marketplace for this right now? Is this something that's still so new that they haven't decided on a place yet to say, like, where would a nonprofit go to find a creator of a digital asset?
So there are organizations out there that have started to create homes for this type of idea, right? And one of my favorite organizations to work with is called endowment.org. And endowment is spelled ENDAO, like a DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. So endowment.org, and they are a on-chain, i.e. they exist on the blockchain. Their transactions are tracked on the chain, on the blockchain. And so they're an on-chain nonprofit that supports nonprofits looking to take advantage of this technology. And their staff have been very helpful. They already have a registry of every 501c3 that is out there. And so nonprofits, all they need to do is kind of claim their page. The endowment folks will work with you to make sure that you are ready to accept donations. And then what ends up happening is they're very, very much involved in the Web3 community. And so they actually help bring NFT creators, bring, maybe play to earn game developers into their space and so forth. Another one, and they've actually signed the partnership, Endowment signed the partnership agreement with Giving Block. Giving Block is probably the biggest company that manages and supports crypto donations, but it's gone beyond crypto to also include NFTs and so forth. And so the idea is being able to work with these organizations, getting familiar with them, having your pages available for people to see them so that you can be approached, I think is great. Great way to start. Twitter and LinkedIn have started to evolve in their crypto and Web3 space engagement. A lot of a lot of Web3 folks are on Twitter. And so if you just do Web3 tech or NFTs or play to earn, Twitter, you'll find a bunch of spaces or threads and creators on that space. LinkedIn has been evolving as well. I've been we've been working on kind of evolving the concept and showing a different side of Web3 on LinkedIn. I'm working with one organization called the 100, and the 100 is a community of kind of Web3 entrepreneurs that are trying to support each other to kind of go out there. And one of the things I like about that is that these are individuals who are trying to create products, services, whatever it might be around this technology. And so I think that nonprofits looking at that would be great. There are several LinkedIn groups that talk about crypto and Metaverse and Web3 as a whole. So I think finding those groups on LinkedIn is another great place to start. And I do believe that there are some conferences that are specific to Web3 game creation and Metaverse creation. And so those are always good. Obviously, the big players in Metaverse creation and technology is going to be Unity. You're going to have Spatial IO. You're going to have Nowhere. So there's obviously, as you can tell, there is a lot of places where if you just do a quick Google search, you will find something that you might be able to connect with. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help anyone.
All right, that's awesome. We'll make sure those list of resources are in the show notes. So phase one is then complete, or say phase two. Phase one would be, and I'm making this up as I go, but phase one would be the nonprofit has decided they want to branch into digital assets. Phase two is they find a creator through one of the resources. They learn more about how this whole system works. I'm curious now to know from the perspective of the owner. So someone is going to purchase this digital asset, and in purchasing the asset, what happens? Transactionally, what happens? I would guess that the creator gets a certain percentage of the sale, the nonprofit does as well, and then what happens from there? Like the owner would keep the asset for a certain period of time, presumably, and then sell it. Could you explain how those kinds of transactions would typically work?
Yeah, and so this is where it starts to get fun from a digital fundraising perspective, right? So one of the things that happens is you're creating digital assets. As a creator, my goal is to create a digital asset that the community will want, right? And so I have, for example, I'm working on creating something, and we have 5 variations of digital assets that are mapped to the real world. We have created a limited run of mints on those digital assets so that we can hopefully motivate some FOMO, fear of missing out, FOMO, and that then driving sales of these digital assets. Because of their limited runs, some people may not be able to get some, and so they might be on the hunt for buying it from someone who did get one. And what ends up happening is there are going to be some individuals that buy as an investment. So this is an Upland, right? So let's say that in Upland, I buy a digital asset for 11,000 UPIX, which is the in-game currency, right? I was able to get it at mint price, the 11,000. Now I can turn around and sell it in a store in Upland. And let's say I want to sell it for 25,000 UPIX, right? So I more than doubled my investment in that digital asset. Well, now when I bought it for 11,000, the creator and the nonprofit received a portion of that. But now when I sell it for 25,000, the creator and the nonprofit again get a portion of that, right? And so the value proposition is that as people buy for investment and then resell for value or buy for collection, right? And even if they just bought it to collect it and they're never going to sell it, at least you got that initial sale from it. And if you're showing it off, then other people might want it, and they'll see it on your property and they'll be like, "Ooh, how do I get one of those?" kind of things, right? So the owner, there's going to be different personas to the owner. And there's going to be those that invest for flipping, and there's going to be those that invest for collecting. And that's the beauty of these digital assets.
And I really want to underline that transaction piece, because I've heard that before and I thought it was wonderful. And imagine the scenario where you have someone that creates a physical piece of art, a painting, right? The only time the artist ever gets paid is the first sale. All subsequent sales, as it passes through ownership, the creator, the artist, never sees a dime. Versus in this scenario, every time it's sold, not only does the creator get a portion of it, but the nonprofit that is mitigating and managing the whole transaction gets it. And that's a wonderful, I'm not sure what the exact word would be, but it's definitely much more beneficial to the creator and to the nonprofit because of the possibility of reselling. So as the asset becomes more valuable, it becomes more valuable for everyone and not just the current owner selling it to the new owner.
Yeah, I like to think of it as royalties, right? I mean, imagine if you were able to get the rights to the Beatles songs, and every time a Beatles song plays, you get a royalty check, right? Who wouldn't want that as a donation?
That's a good way to look at it. So once the owner has it, and let's go with an example. I like to have a more concrete picture in my mind when I do it. Let's say it's, because I like Minecraft. It's the only one out of all the, the names we've mentioned that I actually am familiar with. So you got this little avatar in Minecraft. I've purchased through a marketplace a really cool suit of armor. It really works well for me. And then I get bored of it at some point. Is there, I guess it would be a similar marketplace where I could advertise it, that it's for sale, that I can sell this thing at. Is there any, I guess it would be, well, you tell me, it would perceive to me like a normal transaction. I wouldn't have to pay attention to the details. There would be obviously, various service charges and transactions that happen to the nonprofit, but there's nothing in particular I need to do. Like, it's not extra work for me to sell a digital asset versus a tangible asset, I guess is the question I'm trying to ask.
No, all of the royalty management, i.e. the distribution of funds and so forth, that's all built into the smart contract that is associated with the NFT. And in this case, we would be talking about NFTs. In Minecraft, again, that's the difference between the NFT and the digital asset. That armor you would be able to sell, and you would sell it for currency in Minecraft that you could then use to buy something in Minecraft. But there would be no other value proposition beyond being able to become richer in Minecraft. With an NFT, you actually are able to take it outside of Minecraft and make it available in other marketplaces or translate it into USD in one way or another for both the nonprofit and the owner.
And that's the interesting part.
Correct.
So, yeah, I like that. So you said it's new. I know this whole technology, we're still trying to figure things out. What do you think are some of the challenges that we need to figure out as a community to make this more popular? This whole idea that is there a trust factor? I know you said there are some bad actors in this. Sometimes assets are created that don't really have any real value. They're just created for the sake of hype and inflation. So, what are some of these challenges that we as a community need to overcome before it does become more accepted and more popular and more trusted?
Yeah, there are definitely, like any early adopter. And by the way, blockchain has been around since 2008. So we say early adopter because it really started to kick in, I think, in like 2017 or so. But challenges that I see that still need to be overcome include regulation. Obviously, there is a lot of conversations going on around regulation, mostly focused on the crypto space, but NFTs, I think, have also been looked at. What can you do with NFTs? What can't you do with NFTs? The idea of smart contracts and what's the tax liabilities on these elements and so forth. For nonprofits, obviously, where there is there is no tax liability, it might not be as bad. But for creators and for owners, obviously understanding the regulations around their tax liability is important. The other thing too is the stigma created by bad actors and bad press. I've had several conversations with folks about NFTs, about crypto, about Web3, and how I shouldn't use the terminology because, it's been corrupted by scams and so forth, and pump and dumps and all that, right? These are terms that people have heard around this technology, but it is the technology category, right? It's not like it's a made up marketing word. It is kind of the tech stack, right? It's the evolution of the web. You went from the first iteration of web and you had all of the internet pump and dumps and all that back in the 90s, right? You went into the second iteration of web with people creating TikToks and, the idea of false information and, what is true in echo chambers and so forth, right? And now you're getting into Web3, where you have this concept of true ownership and anyone being able to be part of that. And so do people create, pump and dump schemes and so forth? Yeah, it's happened. So, but that doesn't mean the technology is at fault. It's the users, right? And like any technology tool, it could be used for good and bad. The other part of talking about technology is advancing the technology enough so that it can support day-to-day users. The number of individuals that would want to explore Web3, would want to explore metaverses, that understand what a metaverse might be, is very small right now. And part of that is due to the technology. Part of that is due to the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? So what's the FUD out there around Web3 and crypto and so forth? And so how do you how do you advance the technology? How do you advance the regulation? How do you advance the killer apps so that it becomes day-to-day kind of technology? Just like email, right? I mean, nowadays, no one even thinks about email as a thing, as a thing that we should think about. It just is what we use. And then finally, I think one of the challenges, the big challenge that needs to be overcome, if you kind of think about everything I've been saying, is change management. And change is scary. And in this space, there is no, difference about it, right? If you worked at a for-profit and you went out on a limb with this new technology and it didn't work out, you might get fired. But if you go out on a limb at a nonprofit, that might mean that a child doesn't get a meal, that a puppy isn't saved, that another tree is taken down, or that a cure for some disease isn't found, right? Like there's major consequences to failing, to losing the community's trust, to losing funding that you have because maybe you overstepped a regulation that you weren't aware of or something, right? And so there's a lot of risks. The risks that are associated are very high for nonprofits because of the fact that it's not just about themselves, it's about what they support and the vision that they have.
To that effect, actually, I usually recommend that nonprofits don't be early adopters. As much as I am an advocate for technology, and I do believe it's going to be and helps us in many different ways, because of these risks and the consequences of failure, I generally advise that nonprofits are not early adopters. This is definitely early. I think it's still in the early phases. It's something that I believe the conversation should continue. Nonprofits should investigate this. But do you have a different opinion? Like, do you think that this is already at a point where nonprofits should start really exploring a tangible use of this? Or is it more like we're just about there and, get ready, it's coming soon type of approach? Like, where would you put us on the progress of way too early to everyone's using it and you better be doing it because, otherwise you're missing out?
On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being too early, 5 being like you've missed out, I think that we're probably at like a 2.5, honestly, right? And what I mean by that is I think that there is enough evolution of the technology that if you use caution, right? If you do a little bit of, buyer beware kind of models where you do your due diligence. I've worked with some nonprofits and they have a very good due diligence process, right? Where they kind of investigate what's being done. They look at what previous projects have been worked on. They look at what, who the organization is behind. A lot of times in the metaverse, there's a lot of anonymous kind of elements. And so doing a little bit of due diligence and understanding what you're getting into is important. But to me, I think the most important part of this is it is newer technology, but it's technology that has already been around for 15 years, right? And so it's not that it's brand new, it's just that it hasn't been adopted in mass quantities yet, but it will. And on top of that, the technology, if it aligns with your vision or your mission statement, right? If it aligns with the values of your organization, then I think that there are ways that you can explore it without putting your neck out, kind of thing. I've mentioned in other conversations that I believe the key to success in the metaverse, in Upland, and in these different types of technologies is aggressive patience, right? So aggressively looking at how the technology can be used and so forth, but then having the patience to not just jump on the first thing that comes around, and also understanding that the technology is evolving and you will probably find a very better variation of what you originally thought in like 3 to 6 months.
I like it, aggressive patience. But to go back to your scale of 1 to 5, putting it at 2.5, and that's the tipping point, right? That's, if you were on a seesaw, you're perfectly balanced between the early and the too late part. So, but I imagine that tipping point is gonna, like, the 2.5 is gonna move very quickly to the 2.6, to the 2.7, to the 3, because it's already, if we were to draw like a bell curve, I think that we are more or less at the top of that curve, and the progress to get to 5 will be more quick than it took to get from the 1 to the 2.5. If hopefully people can follow that.
Yeah, no, it is definitely like once it tips, it goes.
Right. Like that's basically it. Like a wave.
Yeah. And what I do like is just working with some nonprofits. I mean, I was able to do a fundraiser for the Child Mind Institute, working with 5 different Discord communities to raise $5,000 in like 3.5 weeks, starting from scratch.
Wow.
And to me, that showed the power of this community.
Yeah. So tremendous opportunity, tremendous reward, perpetual rewards as well. It's not just a one-time situation. So definitely worth exploring.
I do believe that there is a great amount of good that can come out from Web3. I know that there are detractors and that there are challenges, but the technology itself, I can see being very valuable, especially for small organizations. And one of the tips that I would like to leave the audience with is, you as an organization do not need to be an expert in this technology. There are many partners, many individuals that are out there that are willing to support and work with you. On top of that, the generation that is really kind of taking to this technology is very much about mission-based organizations, about causes and social causes and what people care about. And so if you think about the alphas and the Z generation, they are going to be your future donors. And the beauty of this is that donor won't be single track in what they can do. They won't just be giving you USD or a cash donation. They will be able to create multiple revenue streams from a single source. And that, to me, is kind of like the drip to create an ocean.
And that is the real value of these digital assets. Carlos, this has been great. In regards to seeking out a professional for extra help, where can people find more information about you or get in touch with you online?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to provide that. Also, my email address is carlosr@dmgaminginc.com.
Awesome. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.